You'll never make a living drawing pretty pictures. Switch to finance or get out. That's what my father said to me on my birthday. My mother didn't stop him. She just stood there, arms crossed, silent, like she agreed. And that was it. I was no longer their child, just a failure who refused to follow orders. They kicked me out that same night. I stood outside in the rain with nothing but my laptop, my soaked portfolio, and a heart full of shame. But in that moment, shivering, heartbroken, and homeless, something shifted. I wasn't just hurt. I was done begging for approval. I would succeed not to make them proud, but to make them regret ever giving up on me. If you've ever been told your dreams are worthless, or been forced to choose between love and being yourself, this story is for you. I used to be the perfect child as long as I obeyed. But when I chose to study graphic design instead of finance, my parents saw it as betrayal. They believed success only came in suits and spreadsheets. So they tried to control everything, my money, my school, even where I lived. And when control didn't work, they cut me off. They thought kicking me out would break me, but all it did was give me a reason to build something they could never touch. Let me tell you how I went from a dorm room mistake to $1 million startup they begged to be part of. I grew up as the golden child, but only if I followed their script. My parents, Mark and Linda, had a clear plan for me: study finance, get a stable job, marry well, and live comfortably. Success to them was numbers, status, and control. But deep down, I was never interested in finance. I loved creating colors, shape stories through design. When I told them I wanted to study graphic design, their reactions were brutal. Mark's face twisted with disappointment. Linda's eyes filled with silent rage. "You're throwing away your future for childish fantasies," Mark said. "Design won't put food on the table." At first, I tried to keep the peace. I took finance classes alongside design, hoping to prove I could do both. But every time I brought up my passion, they shut me down, reminded me of what real success looked like. It wasn't just words. They controlled my finances, monitored every dollar I spent. They decided where I lived, who I could see, even what extracurricular activities I could join. I was trapped in a golden cage, shining on the outside, but suffocating inside. On the night of my 20th birthday, everything exploded. At dinner, when I refused to quit design, Mark lost it. The anger in his voice echoed through the house. "You're dead to us if you don't drop this nonsense." Linda didn't argue. She looked away, but her silence said everything. After that night, I packed what little I had and left. No warnings, no goodbyes. Homeless, broke, and confused, I had nothing but my laptop and a battered portfolio. At the university dorm, I found a small community of students like me, dreamers, outcasts, those who'd been rejected by their families for chasing passion over tradition. One of them was Sarah, a friend who was building a startup focused on mental health for students. When she asked me to join as a volunteer designer, I hesitated. No money, no promise of success, but it was a chance to keep going. Working on that project, I realized my design skills weren't just art. They could create real impact. The app grew quickly, spreading through campus like wildfire. Our story caught attention. But it wasn't just success, it was validation. For the first time, I felt I belonged. not because of my parents' approval, but because of what I built with my own hands. Yet as my world expanded, so did the distance from my family. The more I succeeded, the more they tried to pull me back. Emails, calls, messages from people I barely knew, all trying to reconnect, but on their terms. I was torn. Part of me wanted to forgive, to heal, but another part burned with the memory of their rejection. And deep down, I wondered, did they want me or did they want control? After that stormy night, when I was forced out of my family home, I had nowhere to go. The university dormitory was the only place I could crash, though it was cramped and cold. My small room barely fit a bed and a desk. The walls were thin, letting through every sound from the hallway, but it was better than being out in the rain with nothing. Life in the dorm was rough. I survived on instant noodles, cheap coffee, and the free Wi-Fi that was my lifeline. Every night, I huddled over my laptop portfolio, spread across the desk, desperately trying to find freelance design gigs. It wasn't easy. Most clients wanted fast, cheap work, and sometimes I had to compete with designers who had years more experience. I remember one late night when a client sent back my design with harsh criticism. "This looks amateur. Fix it or lose the project." It crushed me, but I learned fast. I adapted researched design trends, practiced relentlessly, and slowly built a small but loyal client base. Then, one afternoon, my friend Emily approached me with an invitation that would change everything. She was part of a small startup team working on a mental health app designed to support students who felt isolated or rejected by their families, something she said hit close to home for many. They were looking for a designer who could help create a calming, approachable user interface. I was hesitant. The work was unpaid and uncertain, but I saw a chance to pour my heart into something meaningful. I joined the team as a temporary designer. The first weeks were exhausting. Our team was small and stretched thin, just a few students juggling classes, jobs, and dreams. The pressure was intense. We brainstormed tirelessly about features, user flow, and visuals. I wanted the app to feel like a safe space. Warm colors, gentle curves, inviting typography. Sometimes I stayed up until 3 a.m. tweaking details, imagining the app could be the help I never had. As the app slowly gained attention, on-campus stories started pouring in. Students shared how the app's guided meditations, journaling, prompts, and peer support had helped them through dark times. Our small project began to feel like a lifeline for many. One day, Emily excitedly told me a potential investor was interested in meeting us. Mark Collins was a respected angel investor in the tech community known for backing early-stage startups with strong social missions. Preparing for our pitch was intense. We rehearsed endlessly, fine-tuning every slide, every word. The pressure was suffocating, but the team's energy was electric. The first pitch meeting went well, but Mark asked tough questions about scalability, monetization, and user acquisition. We regrouped and refined our business model. 3 rounds of pitches later, we finally received the news $1.2 million in seed funding to build a minimum viable product. I was overwhelmed. The little project, born out of my struggles and late nights, had caught the attention of serious investors. Suddenly, I wasn't just the kid who had been thrown out by their parents. I was a co-founder of a startup with real potential. But success didn't come without new challenges. The pressure to deliver was immense, and every decision felt like it carried the weight of the team's future. Still, for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. As the news about our mental health app started to spread, everything changed fast. Our once small, almost invisible project was suddenly the talk of the university and the local tech scene. Articles were published on popular student blogs. Online magazines featured us, and I found myself unexpectedly on the cover of the university's own monthly magazine. I remember holding that issue in my hands, the headline glowing with my name as one of the founders behind the app. It felt surreal. But with this spotlight came an unexpected storm. My parents, who had disowned me just months before for choosing design over finance, suddenly resurfaced. They called, texted, and emailed each message dripping with a mixture of pride and veiled regret. At first, I ignored everything. I wasn't ready to let them back into my life, not after the years of control rejection and the night they kicked me out. The wounds were still raw. One evening, after a long day of meetings with our development team, I found an email from my mother waiting in my inbox. The subject line read simply, "We're proud of you." The words inside were carefully chosen. "Dear my name, your father and I have been following your journey, and we want you to know that we are truly proud of your achievements. We realize now how wrong we were to pressure you to follow a path that wasn't yours. We hope we can start healing and rebuild our relationship. Please consider meeting with us." Reading those lines, I felt a rush of conflicting emotions, anger, sorrow, longing. It was like an invitation to walk back into a house full of ghosts I wasn't sure I wanted to face. That night, I sat on my small dorm bed, scrolling through memories and messages, wondering if forgiveness was even possible. Meanwhile, the pressure at work was mounting. Investors and advisors expected rapid growth, and our team was stretched to its limits. We faced technical setbacks. Some app features weren't working as planned, and user feedback sometimes cut deep, reminding me that success wasn't guaranteed. My relationship with Emily, my closest teammate and friend, was also so tested. We clashed over design directions and priorities, the stress bubbling up in heated debates. But through those conflicts, I realized something: this project was bigger than me. It was about helping others like me who felt misunderstood and isolated. One day, as I was preparing for a crucial investor update, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from my father. "I'm sorry for everything. Can we talk?" I stared at the message, my heart pounding. For so long, I had built walls around myself, determined to prove them wrong through my success. But now, the walls felt heavy and lonely. I called him back. Our conversation was awkward at first. Years of silence made every word heavy. He asked about the app, the challenges I faced, and for the first time, he listened without judgment. He admitted he had been wrong to dismiss my dreams and that he feared for my future because he didn't understand my passion. I didn't forgive him immediately, but talking helped. It opened a door. Over the next weeks, we exchanged cautious messages. My parents even tried to meet some of my team, wanting to see the work I was so proud of. I was careful, still guarded, but a part of me wanted to believe in reconciliation. Yet old habits die hard. During a family dinner arranged by my mother, my father slipped into his old ways, criticizing the financial instability of the startup world. When will you have a real job? When will you stop wasting your time on these dreams? He asked sharply. I held my ground. This is my dream and my work. It's real and it's making a difference. That night, I realized the tension wasn't just about my career, it was about control expectations and fear of change. The next morning, feeling drained, I opened an email from one of our investors. The company had just offered a significant acquisition deal, promising financial security and a big platform to scale the app. It was tempting, but I hesitated. Taking the deal meant handing over control to a big corporation, possibly losing the soul of our project. I talked it over with Emily, who reminded me why we started. We built this for the people, not for quick profit. That moment was a turning point. I decided to hold on to keep fighting for what I believed in, even if it meant going against the comfort and security my parents and society expected me to chase. Meanwhile, my parents' messages grew more desperate. My mother sent pictures of my childhood room, of old family albums trying to remind me of the past we shared. One day, I found myself looking at those photos, memories flooding back. I realized I didn't want to be defined by rejection or success alone. I wanted to be whole. The climb was hard-filled with setbacks and breakthroughs, but every step reminded me of how far I'd come from that cold night outside their door to building a startup that was changing lives. I wasn't just fighting to prove them wrong anymore. I was fighting to prove to myself that I could build something meaningful on my own terms. And in that struggle, I found strength. After months of turmoil, balancing the chaos of startup life with the complicated emotions tied to my parents, I found myself standing at a crossroads. The emotional roller coaster had been exhausting. On one hand, the success of the app was growing steadily. On the other, the echoes of my past with my parents haunted me relentlessly. One late night, sitting alone in my dorm room, I stared at the glowing screen of my laptop. The quiet hum of the city outside was a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. I was haunted by one question. Was I building this company just to prove something to my parents? Was I running on a fuel of anger and resentment that would eventually burn me out? A memory flashed back a conversation I had with Marcus, a mentor I met at a startup workshop in New York. I had shared my story with him, hoping for advice. Marcus had looked at me seriously and said, "If you're starting this to prove something to someone, you'll never find peace. But if you start it because you truly care, because it solves a real problem for people like you, then your passion will carry you through the darkest times." His words lingered long after our talk ended. That night, I started to reflect deeper, not just on my relationship with my parents, but on what I really wanted from this project and from life. The app was more than just a business. It was a lifeline for students like me who felt isolated and misunderstood. It was a way to create a community where people could share struggles without fear of judgment. I realized that if I kept focusing on proving my worth to my parents, I'd miss the bigger picture, helping others and growing for myself. I began to shift my mindset. I stopped answering every message from my parents immediately. I started setting boundaries to protect my emotional energy. It was hard. I didn't want to close the door on family, but I needed to prioritize my mental health and my vision. During this time, Emily became my anchor. We spent long evenings brainstorming new features, designing user experiences that felt personal and supportive. She reminded me constantly why we started the app to give a voice to those who had none. One afternoon, we sat in the cramped meeting room of the campus startup hub. Emily pulled out the latest user feedback report. "Look at this," she said, scrolling through messages from users thanking us for the app. One student wrote about us, how the app helped them reach out for help after years of feeling trapped. Another shared how the community feature made them feel less alone during their darkest days. Hearing these stories moved me deeply. It wasn't just about financial success anymore, it was about impact. But the tension with my parents simmered under the surface. One weekend, they flew in unannounced to visit. I was caught off guard, but invited them to the campus cafe. They looked nervous, awkward. My parents wanted to see where I spent my days meet my friends, I told Emily later. That visit was a mix of moments, some painful, some hopeful. My father, who had once scolded me for wasting my time on art, now asked detailed questions about the app's features, how we managed the tech team, and even joked about the pizza we ordered for our late-night coding sessions. My mother watched silently, tears welling up, when she saw the dozens of thank you notes pinned on our office wall. Despite the progress, I still felt a wall between us. They had changed, but the past couldn't be erased overnight. I realized that healing would take time. That evening after they left, I sat in the quiet apartment, feeling both exhausted and strangely hopeful. I picked up my phone and called Marcus. We talked for hours. He encouraged me to embrace patience, not just with others, but with myself. Growth is messy. Family is messy. But don't lose sight of why you started. Those words stayed with me as I made a crucial decision. I told Emily and the team that I wanted to pivot slightly, focusing more on user well-being and less on rapid expansion. We would slow down to make sure the app stayed true to its purpose. Around this time, I received an unexpected email from a big investor firm offering a lucrative buyout deal. The money was tempting security I had never had before, but the offer came with conditions that would force us to change the app's mission and user experience. I brought it to the team. Emily was firm. This isn't just about money. It's about trust. Our users trust us to keep this real. I agreed. Rejecting the offer was a risk, but it felt right. That choice marked my transformation from someone driven by anger and the need to prove myself to a founder focused on creating lasting value. At the same time, I kept setting boundaries with my parents. I explained that forgiveness wasn't instant, but I was open to rebuilding slowly. I asked for honesty and respect, things I hadn't received before. The journey wasn't easy. There were setbacks, misunderstandings, and moments of doubt. But I started to understand something fundamental. I couldn't control other people's feelings or past mistakes. What I could control was my own path forward. In that space of uncertainty and self-discovery, I found strength and freedom. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving on my own terms. And that was the real victory. A few months after turning down the acquisition offer, our app hit 500,000 active users. That milestone was more than just a number. It was a statement that we didn't need to sacrifice our vision to grow, that sticking to our values was not a weakness, but our greatest strength. We started getting attention from larger press outlets, not just tech blogs. Forbes TechCrunch, and even a national morning show requested interviews. Our inbox was flooded. Mentorship requests, partnership offers, interns begging to join our mission. Meanwhile, my parents had gone quiet again. They had stopped asking about investors and PR features. I think they realized I wouldn't let success become a ticket back to blind obedience. I had drawn my line, and for the first time, I was protecting it. But something shifted in me. I didn't want revenge anymore. I didn't want to see them fail. I just didn't want to lose myself again, trying to gain their approval. So I wrote them a letter. Not an email, not a text. A letter. In it, I said, I am not the same person you pushed out that night. That version of me might have needed your love to feel worthy, but I've learned that I'm still worthy, even when I'm not understood. I hope one day we can sit down, not as a child begging to be seen, but as equals who can speak honestly. I didn't know if they'd respond, but writing it was more for me than them. It was closure. It was release. After sending the letter, I focused fully on scaling our team. We moved into a co-working space funded by a student entrepreneurship grant. We hired 2 part-time developers and brought in a licensed mental health advisor to audit our app content. We built an advisory board. We released our biggest update yet, a daily mental check-in tool with personalized feedback. Users responded instantly. Ratings soared. What made me most proud wasn't the downloads or the press. It was the DM from a student in Ohio who said, "Your app stopped me from doing something irreversible. Thank you for making it feel like someone finally hears me." That message broke me open, not in pain, but in purpose. I remember sitting there holding the phone, crying silently. Emily saw me and didn't say anything. She just sat next to me, and we both understood what it meant. We weren't just building a business. We were building belonging. That fall, we were invited to pitch our growth roadmap to a global mental health nonprofit in New York. I stood on stage under blinding lights with a mic clipped to my collar and 300 pairs of eyes on me. I didn't talk about revenue. I talked about the night I got kicked out, the rain, the hunger, the loneliness. And then I talked about what came after, the silence, the slow rebuilding, the community that grew from pain. When I finished, the room was completely still. Then came a standing ovation. We didn't win the grant that night, but we walked out with something even more powerful: clarity, direction, and a team more united than ever. That winter, I turned 23. Instead of a fancy party or family gathering, I spent it with my co-founders in our tiny rented office. We ordered takeout blasted music and built a Lego model of our dream HQ, just for fun. No champagne, no applause, just laughter, real connection. When the clock struck midnight, they surprised me with a cake. They made themselves sloppy icing, uneven layers, and one candle. I made a wish, not for more success, not for reconciliation. I wished that I would never again doubt my worth based on someone else's standards. I blew out the candle, and in that moment, I realized something profound. I had already won, not because of the money, not because of the media coverage, but because I had taken every insult, every rejection, and every ounce of doubt, and I turned it into something real, something that helped people heal, even myself. And if you're listening to this, maybe you've been told your dreams aren't worth it, that your passion won't pay off, that you're selfish for choosing your own path. Let me tell you something. You don't owe anyone your silence just to keep the peace. You don't have to shrink yourself to fit someone else's mold. You're not here to live someone else's idea of success. Start where you are. Even if it's a dorm room, even if it's with nothing but a laptop and a broken heart. Because if you build from truth, pain becomes power. And that power, it changes everything. Thanks for listening to this story. If it spoke to you, don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful journeys like this. And hey, share it with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to start over. Because sometimes revenge is healing. And healing is success.